This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring a discussion on United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee meeting. The participants are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Manas Pratim Bhuiya, journalist.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, the final session of the two-day UN Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee's meeting in India is underway. The meeting has been focusing primarily on dealing with the challenges arising out of possible use of emerging and new technologies by various terrorist groups as well as non-state actors. How do you see India hosting the key conference of the UN Security Council at a time India has been facing cross-border terrorism, as well as the time India has been ramping up its diplomatic efforts to mobilize global support for united efforts to deal with this scourge of terrorism?
India has been dealing with the scourge of terrorism for the last 3 decades or a little more than that. And India has always been bringing this to the attention, to the notice of the global community, that we really need to get together. The whole international community needs to come together and act against this menace in a united way. But you would recall, and the listeners would recall, that till the 9/11 attacks, the Western powers and all the other countries, they used to consider these attacks on India, the cross-border terrorism on India that was taking place. They would look upon this as some law and order problem, some criminal activities, and they would never really give any significant attention or focus on that particular issue. All of that changed with the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center towers in New York and on the Pentagon. And we've seen for the last 20 years plus that the world is focusing on this particular issue. You would recall that after these terrorist attacks, we had the setting up of the 1267 committee under the UN Security Council, where there was, under the rubric of this committee, there would be designation of international terrorist organizations. And since then, there has been a great focus on how this menace can be effectively dealt with. And we have seen also that it works in coordination with the Financial Action Task Force. So money laundering and terror financing, these are the two biggest problems, most acute problems that the world is facing. India has been particularly focusing on this issue of terrorism for the last many years, but I would say particularly since 2014, since the time that Prime Minister Modi took up the reins of power in India. I don't think there has been any single regional forum or international meeting where either the Prime Minister or the External Affairs Minister or the Home Minister have not focused on the issue of terrorism. So it is befitting that when India is chairing the Counter-Terrorism Committee in the UN Security Council during its 2-year tenure as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, that this meeting is taking place in India. In fact, this is the first meeting of the UN Security Council that is taking place in India after the 9/11 attacks. And your listeners are aware that yesterday the meeting took place in Mumbai. That was very symbolic, that was very poignant, when at the same venue where the 26/11 attacks had taken place in 2008, we had 10 terrorists from Pakistan who had come, and they had killed 166 people, 140 Indians and 26 others from 23 countries. And speaking about this, what External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar said yesterday is that the 26/11 attack was not only an attack against Mumbai, but it was an attack against the global community, because the terrorists specifically identified, chose and selected the citizens of different countries that they had pre-marked, and those people were killed. So it is to bring the world on a single platform to deal with the issue of terrorism, and also to focus on the new and emergent technologies which are becoming so very common and which are being used by the terrorists to launch even more violent and more diabolic attacks on innocent people around the world.
This is a very key point, Ambassador Sajjan you have mentioned. Actually, in his remarks, our Foreign Minister Jaishankar has talked about technological innovations and how these innovations have transformed people's lives. At the same time, he also expressed concern about using of these technologies like cryptocurrency, like virtual platforms, like social media platforms by terror groups and non-state actors to spread their ideology and spread their terror networks. The conference primarily is focusing on dealing with these challenges, on how to deal with the challenge of terror networks using these new emerging technologies to get financing, to get support base. Mr. Jaishankar also talked about the use of cryptocurrency. So how do you see it? I mean, his point was that there's a lack of regulatory framework at this point to deal with the challenge of the vulnerabilities of the new technologies, and this is what he wants the world to deliberate on, to find ways so that in fact the terror groups or the hate mongers cannot use new technologies to spread their agenda.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Manas. This is what Dr. Jaishankar spoke about. Number one, that these technologies are becoming very easily available. They are becoming very cheap to use. So the terrorist groups and organizations and even single terrorists, they can use these technologies to devastating effect. During this meeting, I think there were three particular technologies that were chosen, that were identified for special attention. One was in terms of internet. Internet has become such an ubiquitous platform. It is available to each and every one of the individuals. And it is good because internet, we have seen, is a force for good. It has helped to communicate, and it has helped governments also to deliver services in such a good way. But then it is also misused also in terms of social media platforms. So this has been used to launch terror attacks against states, against peaceful organizations, peaceful institutions, innocent men, women and children. So how is it that there can be, whether it is social media or other platforms, how can they be regulated so that it is not an impediment on the free expression of the people, and all the positive aspects of the internet can be harnessed? But when there is hate speech on social media, then there should be some accountability, and these companies, they should be held responsible for this. The second is in terms of digitization, because there also we have seen how in India it has revolutionized the extension of how the government extends benefits and services to the common people to the farthest reaches. There is no middle person. The direct benefit transfer schemes, how they can help common people, poor people in village and remote areas. But then this digitalization is also used for money laundering, for terror financing, and how is it that this can be regulated? And in this context, there is also the issue of the cryptocurrency that you mentioned, that the External Affairs Minister had referred to. And then, of course, there's the issue of drones. And we have seen that as far as the drone technology is concerned, it has been used in very positive effect in terms of taking medicines to faraway places, in terms of spraying insecticides and other chemicals as far as agriculture is concerned. So drones have very beneficial effects, but it is also used to transport explosives, guns, ammunition, and also drugs. The drones have suddenly come onto the global scene. And how is it that the world can work together so that their misuse or abuse, that can also be tackled, that can be dealt with? So I think what Dr. Jaishankar spoke yesterday in Mumbai and what he also referred to today in his opening statement at the beginning of this two-day meeting, I think that really set the tone for the subsequent discussions. And what he mentioned is that he referred to two of the terrorist attacks, the 26/11 terrorist attacks and also the Brussels airport terror attack. At the meeting yesterday, there was also the audio clip of Sajid Mir, who was one of the main organizers, who was the main perpetrators of this attack, how he was sitting in Pakistan and he was directing the terrorist attack in India for the 26/11. And Dr. Jaishankar lamented and expressed unhappiness, dismay that even after so many years, these terrorists have not been brought to book. And he said that these double standards should not be resorted to by countries.
How do you see Dr. Joysankar's comments that the UN has been effective to put countries on notice that turn terrorism into a state-funded enterprise?
I think the message that the External Affairs Minister want to give to all the participants, and I think it's a matter of satisfaction and gratification that all the 15 members of the UN Security Council were represented, the 5 permanent members as well as the 10 non-permanent members, and also the 5 incoming members who will be replacing from 1st of January, who will be replacing 5 members who are going out. All those countries were also represented. So all 20 countries were both in Mumbai and in Delhi. And what Dr. Jaishankar said is that if the scourge of terrorism has to be dealt with, the whole world has to act in a united manner. And there should not be any political considerations when speaking about the designation of these terrorists. We have seen that over the last few months, China has put a technical hold on 5 of these terrorists who have come from Pakistan, whether it is Sajid Mir, who was involved in the 26/11 attack, or it is the son of Hafiz Saeed, or it is some of the other terrorists, about 5 of them. They should have been designated by the UN Security Council, but China has put a technical hold. And without any reason being ascribed to it, it is a very opaque process. And Dr. Jaishankar said, strongly supported that there should be greater transparency. And you would recall also, Manas, that when in 2009, we had asked for the designation of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist under the 1267 committee. At that time also, China had put a technical hold. This technical hold lasted for about 10 years, and on 4 occasions when this issue was taken up in the 1267 committee. Then it was still not, China continued to exercise its veto and put a technical hold. But when the further pressure was mounted on China in 2019 by both the United States as well as the United Kingdom, then only China relented. So I think this is, as Dr. Jaishankar put it, this reflects very poorly on the credibility of the institution if such double standards for political considerations, these designations are not agreed upon. And if we have to deal with it, then the whole world needs to work together. But I think as far as the case of India is concerned, while working very assiduously on the platform of the Security Council, India is also quite convinced that it has to strengthen itself. And that is what we did when we had the Pulwama attack, we had the Balakot strikes in 2019 February, and when we had the Uri attack, then we had the surgical strikes in September 2016. So I think along with strengthening and responding effectively and robustly to any terror attacks that take place against us, we also work with the global community. And the global community stands with India. This is what we have seen. India's position abroad has attracted a lot of support and traction as far as the other countries are concerned.
Ambassador Sajjan, what do you make of this key conference? In fact, what are the main takeaways that are expected to come out of the 2 days deliberations at the UN Security Counter-Terror Council's meeting in India?
I think that's a very valid question to ask when we have such an important meeting taking place. Dr. Jaishankar, in his address, he shared 5 ideas, both the international organization, the United Nations, as well as individual countries could work towards. And those basically relate to how to stop terror financing, money laundering, because that is the lifeline with which the terrorists work. And then after that, we have also a declaration that has been brought out, and that contains a number of guidelines for the countries that how they can effectively deal with this menace. And this is a challenge that is now afflicting. India, of course, has been afflicted the cross-border terrorism, from the cross-border terrorism for the last more than 3 decades. But now it has become a challenge around the world. So I think the results of the meeting, of the discussions, deliberations today that have taken place, that will serve as a very important guidance to other countries when they wish to deal with the issue of terrorism in their own countries and in their own regions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sajjan, for a detailed perspective about India's consistent efforts to build global consensus to deal with terrorism and the ongoing meeting in New Delhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee meeting. The participants were Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Manas Pratim Bhuiya, journalist. This program is produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on a YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.